This is chapter 22, lesson 22, part 1 or part A out of 3. The chapter is far too long to try and do in one screencast. It would take forever, so I'm going to do a series of three really short ones and make sure that you've done your previous work and really well as far as the translation goes. So that way we'll stretch out the work, make it slower, but at the same time you'll do it better. The first part of this lesson is to understand the participle, future, active. Participle is an adjective. That's a crucial part. The Romans love their participles. They use participles all over the place. You have to master participles, and participles are difficult. In order to form the participle future active, you take the fourth principal part. Now remember, the fourth principal part is itself a participle. The fourth principal part is the participle perfect passive. So you take the fourth principal part, and since the participle is an adjective, that means that it has a masculine, feminine, and neuter form. Every participle has a masculine, feminine, and neuter ending because the participle is an adjective. It's just a name for an adjective when the adjective is made from a verb. We've gone over this before. I won't go over that point in any more detail than remind you of it. Once you take the fourth principal part and drop the US, A, or you replace it with you are US, you are A, or you are So I want to make sure that you zoom in on this. You replace the us, ending with a or us, or ending. Fourth principal part, replace the ending, and then you decline it like a 2-1-2 adjective. In other words, you decline it like you would bonus, bona, bonum. If you need the masculine form, you decline it like bonus. If you need the feminine form, it's like bona. And if you need the neuter form, it's like bonum. And then you translate the participle future active as about to love, or about to warn, or about to lead. Whatever the verb is, you translate it as about to love. Here's an example. Orpheus cantaturus a turba feminarum necator. It says Orpheus, about to sing, is killed by a crowd of women. The participle future active is cantaturus. It's the masculine nominative. It's the nominative singular masculine because it agrees with the nominative singular masculine Orpheus. It agrees with Orpheus because it's an adjective. A participle is an adjective. And you translate it, in this case, as about to sing. Orpheus, about to sing, is killed by a crowd of women. Look at the second example. Feminae Orpheum cantaturem necant. The women kill Orpheus, about to sing. It's a little bit awkward in English because you don't use participles the same way or as often. But in this case, cantaturem agrees again with Orpheus. Orpheus is the accusative, singular, masculine. So cantaturem is the accusative, singular, masculine. Orpheus, being about to sing, the women kill him. It's difficult to put it in English without it sounding a little bit awkward. But what you can do is you can add the verb, you can add the word in English like when. Orpheus, when he was about to sing, was killed by a crowd of women. Orpheus, when he was about to sing, is killed by a crowd of women. That's the passive voice for the first example. Or since Orpheus was about to sing, he was killed by a crowd of women. Or because Orpheus was about to sing, he was killed by a crowd of women. Or while Orpheus was about to sing, he was killed by a crowd of women. You can add a word in there to make it sound like a little bit more natural English. But you don't have to. If the only thing you can remember is translated as about to love, about to sing, about to warn, you'll always get it right. It'll just sound a little bit stiff. The next participle that you have to know for this chapter, and you've already done most of this participle work, but it's a good review to do at this point, is the participle future passive. Participle serves as the mood. It means that it's an adjective formed from a verbal stem. The future is the tense, and the passive is the voice. In order to form the participle future passive, you take the second principal part, you drop the re, or the era, or the era, or the re. So what you have to understand when I say that is that the re and the re is the first conjugation verb and the second conjugation verb, and the era is the third conjugation, and the other era is the third I conjugation, and the last RE is the fourth conjugation. So when I say drop the re, era, re, by this point you should realize that that's the first conjugation, second conjugation, third conjugation, third I conjugation, and fourth conjugation. That's the pattern every single time. I've been consistent with that in this class from the very beginning. So follow the pattern. You take the second principal part, and let's say it's a first or a second conjugation verb. You're going to drop the RE or the RE. Then you're going to add endus, or enda, or endum. That's it. So if it's ama, it would be amare, which is the second principal part. Then you would drop the RE. Then you would add endus for the masculine. You would add enda for the feminine. And you'd add endum for the neuter. Then you would decline that like a regular 2-1-2 adjective. Easy. That's for a first conjugation. And a second conjugation, you would just change the stem of that. So instead of ama, you could take a second conjugation verb like moneo. It'd be monere. You'd drop the re, and then you'd add endus, or you'd add enda, or you'd add endum. So that's the first and second conjugation right here. That's done. We had the endus, enda, endum. For the third conjugation, or the third I conjugation, you drop the ere. So for example, you'd have ducera or capera. That's the second principal part. You drop the ere. And for the third conjugation, you'd add endus, or enda, or endum. And for this third conjugation, third I conjugation rather, you'd add I endus, I enda. That's why it's called the third I conjugation, because it has the extra I in there. And then, just like the first and second conjugation, you decline it as a regular 2-1-2 adjective. Bonus, bona, bonum. Endus, enda, endum. Capiendus, capienda, capiendum. And you translate it as about to lead or about to capture. Masculine, feminine, or neuter. You would only ever choose one, because you'd need an adjective to modify a neuter noun, then you'd choose capiendum. If you needed an adjective to modify a feminine noun, you'd choose capienda, and so forth and so on. Finally, there's the conjugation, declension, of the fourth conjugation verbs. For that one, you drop the re, then you add endus, enda, endum. So you'd have audire. You drop the re, so you end up with audi. and then you add audiendus, audienda, audiendum. And then you decline that like a regular 2-1-2 adjective, and it translates as about to hear, or about to hear, masculine, feminine, or neuter. And you can put that in the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the ablative. It's an adjective just like any old regular 2-1-2 adjective. The easiest part of this lesson is the participle perfect passive. That's a complete no-brainer. Participle perfect passive, watch how easy this is. The participle perfect passive is the fourth principal part. That's it. You take the fourth principal part and do nothing to it. For example, the fourth principal part of amo is amatus, amata, amatum. That's it. It's a 2-1-2 adjective. You decline it like a regular 2-1-2 adjective, and you translate it the way you've already learned to translate the participle perfect passive. Having been loved, for example, or loved. Having been loved, or just loved. Either one is acceptable, and it's a frequent use in Latin, the participle perfect passive. But it's an easy lesson, and you've already seen it for a long time. I won't belabor it. Participle present active is something else you've seen, but it's worth reviewing because it is complicated. Participle present active, you take the first principal part. We haven't seen that pattern so far, and you drop the re, era, re. You have seen that already in this lesson. Take the first principal part, take the second principal part, and you drop the re, era, re. There is no re, era, re in the first principal part. You take the second principal part, you drop the re, era, re, and then it gets complicated. You've got to do it on a case by case, or should I say declension by declension basis. So look at this carefully. For the first and second declension, you take that second principal part, you drop the re, era, re. So here's a first and second declension example. Amare, drop the re. Mone, drop the re. And then you add ends. Here's the masculine, therefore, almonds. Here's the feminine, almonds. Here's the neuter, almonds. It's not that simple, though. That's only for the nominative. This is a 3-3-3 adjective, not a 2-1-2 adjective. So for the genitive form, you have to do something different. For the genitive form, the stem changes like it always does, and it becomes amantis, and amantis. It's not that complicated. Then you decline it like a regular old 3-3-3 adjective, or it's not actually a regular old. It's its own category. It's a participle. And you've already gone over this lesson, so this is another point that I won't belabor or reteach to you. But if you haven't mastered this, you're going to get lost. This is a summary of the pattern, and if you don't understand it, you need to contact me. For example, the accusative is going to be the same in the neuter, and the plural neuter is going to be different. Note that it has the I instead of just the A. This is what makes it different from a regular, plain, simple 3-3-3 adjective. It's a form or a type of 3-3-3 adjective. And you have to add the I into it. The ablative singular, for example, is even more complicated. It can be amanti or amante. It's a very complex form, and therefore the genitive plural has a slight difference. It is amantium. it has an I again. This has an I, the genitive plural, the nominative plural has an I, and the ablative singular may have an I. Besides these problematic I's, which occur all the way through in the genitive plural, and which occur all the way through in the ablative singular, the I or the E, this is otherwise just a regular 333 adjective. But it's hard to say that because, again, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and because the nominative and accusative are the same in the plural as they are in the singular, you have 6 differences from a regular, plain and simple 333 adjective. Again, if this is hard for you to follow, it's because you didn't learn it the first time, and you've got to go back and carefully review that work. So again, I don't want to reteach that whole topic, especially for people that learned it the first time, but I'll keep emphasizing these points as I go over each declension, and you should either learn it this time or it should ring a bell. For the third declension, for the third declension, you're going to do the same thing as you usually do when you take the second principal part, dukara. You're going to drop the ERE for a third, and then you're going to add ENS, ENS, and ENS. However, this is a 333 adjective, or a 333 participle, which is, again, slightly different. So for the genitive and the rest of the forms, you have to have a T in there. It's going to be ducentis, ducentis, and ducentis. Then it'll be the dative form, which will be I. The accusative form will be EM, except for the neuter, because the neuter is always exactly the same as the nominative. The accusative is always exactly the same as the nominative. For the ablative singular, it's going to be ducent E or I. Just like for the last declension, it's either going to be I or E. It's either going to be E or I. It doesn't matter which order you put it in. There's two alternatives that Latin authors use. The plural will be, follow the same pattern as a 333 adjective, with the exception that it has the letter I in certain forms. Namely, it has I in the nominative plural, in the neuter, which means it has to have the I in the accusative plural, in the neuter, and it has the I in the genitive plural, in all genders. So this is the pattern to form the nominative singular, which is different from all the rest which have a T. And on top of that, there are a lot of forms that have an I. And the ablative singular even has two alternatives, either an E or an I for the participle present active. This has been an example of the third conjugation. Now we'll do the third I. So the third I declension is not going to be that much different, obviously. By now you should have picked up a pattern. You take capera, the second principal part, you drop the ERE, and you have cap. Then you add IENS for the nominative singular masculine, the nominative singular feminine, nominative singular neuter. IENS. They all look exactly the same. Then you add I-E-N-T-I-S. They all look exactly the same. For the accusative, you add EM for the masculine and feminine. And for the neuter, as always, the nominative and accusative are exactly the same. Then for the ablative, you have the option of adding an E or an I. Roman authors use one or the other. It's difficult to know when. The plural doesn't have any surprises. You add ES or IUM or IBIS or ES or IBIS. I ran out of space. And that's the same for the masculine and the feminine. The neuter is mostly the same, but you add INTIA for the nominative, and therefore INTIA for the accusative. Otherwise, they share the same forms. And then finally, the fourth declension is, again, at this point, it has to be for you a no-brainer. For the fourth declension, you follow the exact same pattern. You take the word audio, audire, and then you drop the RE only, and then you add IENS for all genders, but then the stem changes in the genitive like all 333 adjectives, and it's INTIS. The masculine and feminine behave just like they did in the other conjugations, and the neuter behaves just like it did in the other examples shown earlier. You've seen all these forms before, translating them or in screencasts, so I don't want to teach the entire lesson again, but please contact me if you don't understand this, because the Romans use a lot of participles. This is part 1, the end of part 1 of chapter 22. This will allow you to get through one exercise this week or next week, and then what you'll be able to do is 2 more screencasts to finish this chapter adequately without having to do an hour-long screencast, because there's too much material in this chapter.